Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. Today we're going to be looking at the Burnt Man scenario. This is the second scenario from the Cthulhu by Gaslight 3rd edition supplement. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe this video if you like the content. I will be coming out with more Cthulhu by Gaslight videos in the near future. Just before I begin, I want to point out that this scenario was written by Richard Watts, who has recently subscribed to my channel. Very pleasantly surprised by that. But of course that won't affect my review. But fortunately, it doesn't have to, as I loved this scenario. This adventure is set in the moors of Dartmoor in Devon in mid to late December, and the investigators are asked to investigate a curse, a murder, and a haunting, all plaguing the same family. That's about as far as I can go without getting into spoilers. So here's your spoiler warning. If you're a player wanting to play this scenario, please stop watching here. If you've already played this, or if you are a keeper looking to run this scenario, then let's go check it out together. Okay, so this scenario definitely resembles The Hound of the Baskervilles by the Sherlock Holmes novel by Arthur Conan Doyle. And the author of this adventure points out that you can use it to build up the atmosphere. It's absolutely not the same story, but it is set in the same area out in the moors, and it deals with a family curse. When I was rereading The Hound of the Baskervilles in preparation for this video, I loved the quote from Sherlock Holmes in that story saying, "The setting is a worthy one, if the devil did desire to have a hand in the affairs of men." So really helping you imagine that this is a really bleak place to have your scenario. And the investigators will kind of be on their own against the forces of nature. So let's start off with the keeper information, which I have to say is laid out really well, clearly and concisely. This is how keeper information should be. Don't make it difficult for the keeper to understand what is going on. The keeper has to understand the mystery so they can present a mystery to the players. So this layout is fantastic. There's kind of a small detail of a long history of the little people in Britain. And they used to sneak out of their warrens to murder travelers, steal babies, and just cause general chaos. Over the centuries, they have dwindled in numbers, and now they're mostly confined to small pockets around the country. They have a few special days throughout the year where they hold terrible rites, worshipping the outer god, I believe, Shub-Niggurath, also known as the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. And there are special ancient stones which are important to them in their rituals. But now, the keeper information for modern times is Sir William Fitzhugh Allington. I always say Allington, it's Allingham. Who is Lord Bargrove and the Squire of Bargrove Parish. He was born a third son, and he wasn't meant to really inherit the land and the titles, but he murdered his two elder brothers, making their deaths look accidental, so that then he would be the one to inherit everything. He was a pretty ruthless landowner, and people who couldn't pay, he just evicted them. He went against several of the local traditions, and the main point here is he wanted some local men to remove one of these standing stones, which was important to the little people, but they wouldn't. So he hired outside help, so people from outside of the village, to do it. The local workers didn't know that this is a little people sacred stone. It's just one of those things, you don't mess with those old sacred stones. But because of this, this affront, the little people killed him, killed Lord Allingham. Got it right. Lord Allingham by tying him to the stone, and they cut his wrists, cut open his stomach so his entrails would come out, and then burnt him. But this alone is not enough. The little people need to re-sanctify the stone. And to do this, they need to sacrifice 6 children to Shub-Niggurath, burning them alive in a Wicker Man style cage. And so they plan to do this on the solstice. The children have not yet been captured. Lady Allingham is right. The death of her husband has kind of caused her to kind of break down a little bit. And she keeps thinking of this curse that hangs over her family, that all of the Allingham men will die before they're 40. And there's also little people, unbeknownst to her, little people are causing bits of mischief around the house. So the lady thinks that her home is being haunted by her dead husband. And she wants the investigators to investigate the haunting and see what is causing the haunting, and will finding her husband's murderer put his soul to rest. So that's the kind of the information that the keeper gets in advance. That's background information that you need to know, of course, secret from the players. And now we get into actually running the scenario. So the investigators will receive this letter from a lawyer asking them to come to his firm, and this happens in London. And the lawyer is a representative of Lady Allingham, and he tells them about the haunting suspicions. They are to go down, check out if it's real, and if possible, put Lord Allington's spirit to rest. He'll hand over some train tickets. They can stay at Bargrove Hall, the large manor there, and they will also get a nice payment of £10 per week. And before they leave, the investigators can try to do a little bit of research before leaving, so they can find out about the deaths in the family and the curse. And the curse, if they research enough, they can find out there is an unbroken line of males in the family who have all died before their 40th birthday. And they can trace it back. It seems to have started around 1640. After they've done a little bit of research, they will travel from Paddington Station in London to Princeton Station in Devon. And they'll get a view of the beautiful countryside while they're traveling, and they will arrive around dusk. Princeton is the nearest place to Bargrove with a police station, so this is where they can talk to Constable Halifax. And depending on the investigator's credit rating, that will determine how he treats them. If they are above a certain level, he'll talk to them quite openly and frankly about it. And if they're lower down, he will be quite opposed to outsiders getting involved in matters that don't concern them. If you can have a successful law or credit rating, or in the old version debate, which is now persuade, any successful role there would also allow them to see the official documents describing that Lord Allington was bound to the stone, his wrists slit, his stomach slashed, and his entrails removed while he was still alive, and then he was set on fire. When reading this, an archaeology, a history, or an anthropology role will remind the investigators of the ancient Celtic rituals of triple death, so killing someone in 3 different ways. And normally it was done by strangulation, beating, clubbing, and drowning. So this is a little bit different, but again it talks about a kind of an old, maybe druidic ritual. So the last thing that you need to know in Princeton is that there is a post office here, and this would be where they would send or receive telegrams if they're trying to contact the outside world. But a little bit after they arrive, so they've had a little bit of time to check out Princeton, a carriage will arrive to take the players to Bargrove Hall. And as you're traveling from Princeton out towards Bargrove, definitely start playing up the gloom of the moor here, the isolation, possibly the fog rolling over the moors as well. Really make it start to seem you're on your own here, and a very serious feeling of foreboding here. When they arrive, Lady Allingham is dressed in all black, and there's a very nice and kind of subtle scene here where it shows the difference between lower, middle, and upper class. When they arrive, there are only enough seats for any middle and upper class investigators, with the lower class investigators assumed to be servants, and they're expected to stand during this. I think this is a nice way to show that class is important without kind of saying lower class people can't enter the manor. And in previous adventures, I think they've gone a little bit too far that way. But this is realistic and kind of subtly talks about that. Anyway, Lady Allingham asks the players to solve the haunting, put her husband's spirit to rest, and she explains that since the murder, strange things have been happening around the house, doors and windows being opened by no one, objects moving around, rearranged, furniture moving to different rooms and stuff like that, and all of it is happening at night. Servants have stayed up at night to try and catch someone in the act, but so far they haven't been able to do anything. Actually, it's the little people who have been sneaking in and moving things around. They are planning on kidnapping the young lady of the house, Ursula Allington, the 8-year-old daughter of the Lord and Lady, soon for their sacrifice, and they're just kind of making themselves familiar with the house so that the kidnapping can go down smoothly. The servants will be made aware of the investigators being here, and in general they will be very accommodating. The coachman and the carriage are at their disposal if they need to go anywhere. But at this stage, it's probably late at night, so the investigators will probably be tired, so they're asked to please just take it easy tonight. During dinner, and this will happen all throughout, lower class investigators are expected to eat with the servants after the others have eaten and in the servants' quarters. Yes, so after that we get this very nice map of the manor. There is a description of each room, but a lot of them are not really important for the mystery, but it will be fun for the investigators to go around and check out all the rooms. The main thing on the ground floor is the library, which it might take the players several days to go through everything there. And there are 3 books of important, or 3 pieces of information that are somewhat important or relevant here. There is a history of the Bargrove parish, which talks about some facts and some legends, some half-truths about the area, and it links the origin of the name to druids, a druid grove, and it was called the Burnt Grove, and then it became Bargrove. And this dates back all to Roman times, so it was pre-Roman druidic area of potentially sacrifice, and also talking about fire as well. The next book that will be important in the library is talking about it's called The Allinghams of Bargrove Hall, which is the history of the family from about the 1200s. But the first thing of interest is in 1642, when Sir Montague started the curse. He caught a gypsy stealing a horse and decided to beat the boy to death. The mother, the gypsy mother of the boy, cursed the Allingham family, saying, "As my boy hath died young, so shall ye and your sons, until the old gods waken, and night becomes day." If you wanted to change as the scenario goes on, you could possibly change this to have a few extra hints towards what's going to happen. But definitely nice quote to include. And the third final thing to find in the library is a page, this page here, which I'll show, talking about fairies. And it talks a little bit about the little people as well. One thing is just saying that there's, different types of them, but they're very sensitive, easily offended, and they often bestow curses, ill luck, or even death upon their offenders. It also gives some hints, for example, with brownies, which would be a similar but maybe better natured ones, that there's habits of like leaving milk out at night for them. And I'd say as the investigation kind of goes on and as it gets closer to that winter solstice, maybe some of the people in the town start doing some of these rituals for protection, or just to appease the little folk if they think that that's what's going on. So that's downstairs, really. Upstairs, there is the schoolroom where Miss Ursula is tutored by her French nanny, Josephine Ducret. And this is so that Miss Ursula doesn't have to rub shoulders with the locals in the school. Up even higher is the attic, which has the servants' quarters. And there's nothing of interest there, but if the players do go in without permission, they will start to find their stay really inconvenienced and unpleasant because the servants have a grudge against them. And yeah, as I said, there's nothing much else that you'll find in the house, but the players will have some fun investigating around, and everything is detailed pretty well. As for the personalities in the house, Lady Allingham is in mourning. She has lost a lot of weight. She's very thin, and she's under a great amount of stress. So she can snap easily and get confused quite easily. She is convinced that the villagers are responsible for her husband's death, and she thinks that she's their next victim, and so she hates them. She thinks it's the villagers because her husband was really hated by the villagers, and we'll come to that a little bit later. Miss Ursula is the 8-year-old daughter, and she's a bit of a lonely child with no playmates. Because she's so young, she can't really understand her father's death. She is close with Gerald Smith, who is the gardener on the grounds. And I would really say it would be worth your while to make the players connect with her well, to connect with Miss Ursula well. Maybe she's really taken by something specific about one of your players, or just in general about people from outside, investigators. Maybe she likes reading mystery novels or something like that. But definitely make a good connection between the two of them, so that then later when she is abducted, it's more meaningful as well. So Miss Ursula is also slightly psychic and has terrible nightmares. So she can actually kind of a little bit vaguely kind of foresee what's going to happen to her. And sometimes she'll be talking about like a man burning or something like that. And the investigators might toss this aside as like a vision of her father burning to death. Whereas in reality, it's actually a vision of her own fate burning inside the wicker man. And in addition to having these psychic dreams, she also sleepwalks as well, which will come up a little bit later. We get some information. There's a small paragraph about most of the staff in the house, but there's nothing too important. It's very good for role-playing as well, especially there's a little bit of rivalry between a few of them. But most of the servants also, they often frequent the inn in Bargrove Village, and they find it hard to believe that anyone there would have killed Sir William. Mackenzie, who is the coachman, however, does think it's possible. And Mackenzie and Smith, the gardener, they both believe in the supernatural, and they think that it's probably due to the curse. With Mackenzie thinking the curse forced one of the, or inflicted one of the villagers to kill Sir Allingham. So at this stage, probably the investigators will want to go to Bargrove Village because there's nothing more to be learned in the house. The Bull and the Bear is the local inn, and that's always a good place to talk to the locals. There's also a church, a forge, a school, and a couple of the houses are set aside for the outsiders. The outsiders are the workers that Sir Allingham brought in to do the work that the locals wouldn't. And a great piece of writing here. Lord Ham kicked out several of the elderly people from their homes to house the outsiders. And I really think you should use this to paint Sir Allingham as a real villain whom a lot of the villagers would hate, throwing out, old people who have been living here for so long just because they're unproductive, and then using their houses to bring in the outsiders to do the work because the locals refuse to mess with the ancient traditions. After Sir Allingham's death, most of the outsiders have left, but two families stay on who have been contracted by Lady Allingham to do a few bits around. So when you're talking, or when your investigators are talking to the villagers in the inn, most of them think he died from the curse, but they're not too specific about it. But a few of them do say he would still be alive if he hadn't messed with that old standing stone. And so you can hear an old wives' tale about the standing stone and some little people kind of going into a door there. There is no door, but that's the story. So they can go and investigate it as well. The stone itself is in one corner of Hobbs Field, which is about 2 miles outside of Bargrove. So I'll show the map in a little bit. There is also another place of interest surrounding this, and this is Eagle Tor. So looking at this map now, you can see that Bargrove is in the middle, and the standing stone in Hobbs Field is northwest. Northwest. And in the exact opposite direction to the southeast is Eagle Tor. And Eagle Tor is where the climax of the scenario will occur. You can investigate it now, and it'll give off a weird sense, but there's no information there. One of the things that might draw your attention, and you could even have some people pointed out that this is a strange place, is that the moors are mostly bare of any real growth, particularly trees. But on Eagle Tor, this hillside or small mountain, there's lots of trees growing. Now they're kind of weird and dark trees as well. And the reason that they're growing here is because of the fertilizing influence of Shub-Niggurath. So here are the events that are likely to happen. You might have a seance there because Lady Allington thinks she's being haunted, and she is very connected to spiritualism. She's very fond of that. But that might or might not happen depending on whether your players suggest it. But after the players do arrive, every night the little people will start to get up to their tricks, like opening doors, making noises, moving or stealing things and stuff like that. The scenario actually suggests some methods for finding ghosts, such as laying down flour, tying cotton across doorways and stuff like that. If they do the former, they can find footprints in the flour, but they're kind of small, like a child, so they might just attribute this to Miss Ursula sleepwalking. And each night, the disturbances become bigger and more noticeable, and some investigators or staff might even catch glimpses of faces at the window. So really, really play this up and make it seem like a very strange haunting, and make it really scary, if you can, for the investigators. Later on, some gypsies will arrive and they camp by the lake. So the lake is between Bargrove Hall and the Eagle Tor, which is very important. After they arrive, a young 14-year-old gypsy boy, Ruben Petunlegro, maybe, something like that, comes begging for food and hoping to, once he's admitted, hoping to kind of steal whatever he can when he's there. If he is asked to, if the players ask, he can lead them back to his camp and they can talk to the gypsies there. There are about 30 gypsies, and they've already had a run-in with Constable Halifax from Princeton. So they're a little bit wary of strangers who are telling them to, get off their land or something like that. So they'll be directed towards Maria Petalengro. Maybe that's right. She can only really give some minor cryptic information about the curse, and that's about it. That's about all the information they'll get from the gypsies for the moment anyway. They also have a sidebar here about the histories of the gypsies, the Romani, and how they are regularly accused of being thieves, being cheats, and sometimes even steal children. The scenario says that maybe the thieves and the cheats sometimes comes from real incidents, but the stealing children is probably something that parents use to just keep their kids scared and behaving well. Personally, I advise using these prejudices of the locals. Get the locals to talk about these things and to like really have a fear of the gypsies. This will also give you a chance to bring up the idea of kidnapping children, which will happen later in the scenario, just not by the gypsies. And then it suggests that if anything does happen, the villagers will probably blame the gypsies, so the investigators will know where to go if there's something going on. Here we also find that there is an optional jailbreak that you can do, just like in the Hound of the Baskervilles. And the goal for this is not so much to add the escaped convict, but also to tie up the police so that the investigators can't really go to the police if, some children get kidnapped. They're kind of all on their own, while the police resources are tied up trying to capture the convict. Another thing, I think it's also good to have this because if the investigators are totally lost as to what to do, because there's a little bit of a chase later on, they could maybe go out in the moors, and if they find the convict, he can trade information for his life. And he saw a lot of children or children-like creatures running towards Eagle Tor. So just to add that extra kind of fail-safe in case the investigators are just totally lost, because the direction towards Eagle Tor is a little bit unclear. It might be that they miss it. So at this stage we have the main event, well, one of the main events, on the morning of December 21st, which is the winter solstice, very important day. It's snowing and Miss Ursula has been allowed outside to play. But now her tutor can't find her. And of course, she has been kidnapped by the little people. At the same time, 4 more children have been captured from the village. And finally, Reuben has been kidnapped by from the gypsies. So Reuben of the gypsies, the child that you met at the manor. So there's a total of 6 children captured. Gerald Smith, the gardener who works at the manor, said that he last saw Ursula playing by the pond near the house with a child who he thinks probably was a gypsy. If you look out, there's a tracking roll can find 2 sets of child-sized footprints leading across the moor. Remember, it's snowing now, so there's a little bit of that. One group of servants will go to the village to try and get a search party together, and Mackenzie, the coachman, will take the sleigh across the moor looking for Miss Ursula. And it's said that hopefully the players will join in the moor search. And it should be pointed out as well that the footprints lead in the general direction of the gypsy camp. So again, just to kind of like increase the suspicion of the gypsies. The village is in a panic if they arrive there. All of the outsiders who helped tearing down the stone, so the 2 families that remained, all of them have been murdered. And there's a very old stone knife has been found there. Also, 4 children have been kidnapped. So Constable Halifax is working to gather any able-bodied people with any kind of weapon to go out and search the moors. All of the villagers kind of blame the gypsies and want to go there to confront them, which again is also going across the moors. If the investigators follow the tracks across the snow, they will soon find many more tracks kind of coming together, many little feet. But as the snow continues to fall, the trail gets fainter and fainter. At the gypsy camp, there's going to be a big fight between the villagers and the gypsies unless the players can stop it. So they might have to persuade or have a grand entrance or something like that. This is also a good chance to get all of the information out that like 6 kids have been captured. And maybe once both groups realize that there's children missing from the village people, no copyright, the village people, and also the gypsies, that maybe they can work together and there's something more evil at foot. So at this stage, there are a few ways to hint towards Eagle Tor, which is where they should absolutely go. But this is why I think maybe having the convict pointing out that he saw people running up that way might help as well. Because for me, if I was thinking of this, I'm thinking there's going to be some kind of sacrifice at the stone, which was the cause of all of this trouble. But the stone is actually in the opposite direction, so the players could go in the opposite direction. One of the things that they suggest that you could do in the book is that there's kind of a brief respite in the snow falling, and faint lights can be seen up at the top of Eagle Tor. And then the snow kind of comes down again, and vision is obscured. But some villagers and some gypsies will also join the investigators as they go to Eagle Tor. And as they get closer and closer, they can see the flicker of flames and the beating of drums. And once they get even closer, they can start to hear the screams and the sobs of the children. So this is really going to urge them on to go faster. But, of course, the little people also have defenses. As they're about halfway up Eagle Tor, the trees start flailing their branches at the investigators. Of course, this will cause some sanity loss and damage, although it can potentially be dodged. But several of the villagers and the gypsies will be killed or injured from this, leaving only 1d6 plus 1 combined of villagers and gypsies to help the players. At the top of Eagle Tor, there is the Burnt Grove. There is a huge wicker man-like bonfire, and the little people are dancing around it. It doesn't say exactly how many, but later on it does say that there are hundreds of eyes looking at them. So, we're talking about at least, 50, but possibly 100. But yeah, huge numbers of them anyway. The wicker man is kind of swaying slowly, and it appears to be a little bit unstable. Seeing this whole sight again will cause some more sanity loss. But the investigators have arrived at the perfect or the worst time, which is during the summoning of a Dark Young of Shub-Niggurath, because the Dark Young will witness the sacrifice as part of the reconsecration of the Standing Stone. The High Priest should be kind of easily recognizable casting this magic, and he's also drawing upon the power of the crowd using more magic points to guarantee the success of the ritual. And in 1d6 minutes, the Dark Young will appear. So there are 2 or 3 kind of main targets. The book lists 2, but I think there's 3. One is the Wicker Man itself. If the players attack this, then they will have to deal with all of the people. Like suddenly, all of the little people are looking at them and are going to rush and attack them. But they might save the children. 2, they can attack the shaman or the high priest. And this is not specifically dealt with in the scenario, but it should be kind of a similar result to them attacking the Wicker Man, that suddenly all of the little people will turn and face them and start attacking them. And then the third thing is that they can run into the melee of the little people, and doing this has a 50% chance of disrupting the spell. The scenario does also say that a direct attack on the little people would be suicide, because the players are outnumbered so much. So the best option might be to save the children first and then try to just run away to safety. There's enough kind of space that you can kind of zig and zag between the little people and get over to the Wicker Man. And leaping on top of the burning structure will probably topple it over to safety, relative safety. Alternatively, the investigators might ask the villagers and the gypsies to attack the little people to create a diversion while they go to save the kids. Or the opposite, that the investigators will attack the little people while the villagers go to save the kids. If the children are freed, actually, like say by toppling over the wicker man, once it lands and it breaks, children being children, they will actually run scared away and they will go into the woods, and it'll take a little bit of time to round them up. If the investigators didn't do anything to stop the summoning, they will hear a sickening slopping sound on the ground as the ground kind of begins to pound and the trees move as the dark young starts chasing the investigators. Mackenzie, the coachman, can drive the sleigh once all the children are on board. Because of the number of people on the sleigh, it's more difficult for Mackenzie to drive, so his 85% drops down to a 65%. The sleigh itself is, of course, faster than the pursuers, but if there's a fumbled roll, there will be an accident. And if there are 3 failed drive rolls, the dark young will have caught up with them enough to start flailing at the players. If a 4th failed roll happens, they have been caught and will be overwhelmed by the chasers. So a fight will happen where the investigators are almost certainly going to die. It's not really suggested how long the chase should go for, how many rolls should be involved, but just keep it dramatic, and especially with the snow falling, the ground uneven, the strong light from the wicker man and the darkness of the moors. And of course the moors should be very uneven and with lots of hidden stones, just to make sense for those drive rolls as well. And of course this is a sleigh. It's a horse-drawn sleigh as well, not just going down to the bottom of the mountain and then we're finished. So of course horses can get injured in that as well. So if the investigators do make it back to the town, the dark young and the little people should kind of be chasing them all the way up until they make it to the town. And yeah, I'd say just keep it always a little bit close and interesting. But the reverend of the town has organized that there be lamps in every window, and the large church bells would ring to support all of the men out on the moor as they try and find the kids. And at the sight of this, all of the memory of their defeats and their depression comes back to the little people, and it scares them and they run away. The dark young is bound by the spell, and he has to stay with the little people, so the dark young also runs away. So it is up to the keeper as to what happens after this, but the little people miss their chance on the solstice. This was their chance to kind of reconsecrate it. So it's not as if the little people are just going to try it again the next day. Alternatively, you could say that to summon a dark young, a sacrifice is needed. So given the fact that the children weren't sacrificed, maybe the dark young starts attacking the little people, and possibly the next day you might find kind of withered corpses or something like that out in the moors, which would be a happy ending. I always think it's nice to, for Call of Cthulhu, I think it's good to kind of leave that uncertainty there as well, that, you know, maybe something like this is going to happen in the future. You don't want to totally wipe them out. So you might find some bones, but clearly this is not the full population, because you saw hundreds of them. So, but yeah, giving that like totally uplifting one is a little bit not Lovecraftian as well. You should have like, we won today, but you know, the danger is still out there, in my opinion. So basically that is the end of the scenario. There are some rewards and penalties depending on what happened. If you killed some little people, if you saved the kids, or if some of them died. But yeah, that's the scenario. Personally, I think it's great. I really love the scenario, especially having reread it after just rereading The Hound of the Baskervilles. It's very, very thematic as well. The players will start off investigating a murder which is connected to a curse, which leads to suspicion of the villagers, probably. And then that suspicion switches over to the gypsies, although they're new to the town. There's also like talks of a haunting. You could also possibly have the escaped convict. If he escaped earlier before the death, he could have been involved as well, especially if he had some connection to Sir Allingham. Allingham, I think Allingham. Perhaps, he used to work for Sir Allingham, and then he got very vocal about not moving the stone, and maybe he assaulted Sir Allingham, and now he is in the prison, and then he escapes just before Sir Allingham actually dies. I think that could add in an extra layer and an extra suspicion. It's probably him. So there are a few loose ends to tie up there. You might have some of the villagers say that they suspect Sir Allingham of killing his brothers, that they think they weren't accidents. Because apart from that, the keeper knows that, but like the investigators would have no idea of that really, especially with the idea of the curse. Also, the standing stone is a key focus of the adventure. And as I mentioned before, there's nothing really pointing towards Eagle Tor. So I would suggest that you add in more things really pointing the adventurers towards Eagle Tor. One idea is to maybe have that standing stone be one of 6, and all of them kind of are, quite far away, but kind of surrounding Eagle Tor. Eagle Tor is at the center of that 6-pointed circle. And 6 is just because it references the 6 kidnapped children, giving it a little bit of significance there, because why sacrifice children? Also, I would say have the locals mention some things about the winter solstice being an important, old traditional day. And even if it's just like the more elderly people, for example, I mentioned before, like they're following some of the old traditions, like leaving milk out for the brownies or something like that. And if you have some of the houses in the village doing that, then maybe those houses were spared from losing their children. Maybe that would kind of really point towards something with the little people or with fairies or something like that. Another thing is to have rumors about maybe the weird trees up on Eagle Tor, maybe in the town's history. So not something that any of the people alive now have seen, but just old stories talk about the trees moving or something like that. There is a Dark Young summoning, of course, in the scenario, and Dark Young can appear like trees. If you're not sure how to play the Dark Young, how to think about its actions and its attack, you could have a look at the excellent 2-book slipcase set, Malleus Monstrorum by Chaosium. This is for the 7th edition. In the first book, you can find them listed under Shub Niggurath, Dark Young of. At first I was looking up Dark Young, but they're under D, but they're listed under S for Shub Niggurath. It gives some extra description and how to play them and their different attacks as well. So I think that's definitely worth trying if you're considering running this adventure. I think that this adventure does have much more of a Gaslight era feel to it compared to the other ones that I've reviewed. Although it doesn't take place in London apart from the very start, the first scenario in this book does. So in this Cthulhu by Gaslight 3rd edition, we have the first scenario set in London, and then the second scenario is starting to investigate places outside of London. I think that's perfectly reasonable to have it set in the countryside. If you read The Hound of the Baskervilles, I think you'll be really well prepared for the setting, kind of describing the moors and the sense of dread there. The house you're staying in is also, it's a big manor out in the moors, and there's no electricity. Very, very Gaslight themey there, I think. The villains in this scenario are the little people. Well, yeah, I guess the little people. Sir Allingham is a terrible person as well, but really, well, he's already dead. The villains are really the little people. And these have been detailed quite well in the Gaslight book, so it's a good use of them. I think I complained about the second edition book that the scenario really didn't use any of the information presented in the guidebook. Whereas here, the Little People was one of the new additions to Cthulhu by Gaslight, and then it's used in one of the scenarios. I think that makes a lot of sense. I definitely recommend this scenario. I think it's a lot of fun. And I would just say, add in some more references to the Little People, just little subtle references, and possibly some other fairies as well, and play up that kind of ghost haunting aspect too. Also, do make sure that people around, as I mentioned before, do talk about the importance of the solstice. It's important that day. But it's a great scenario, especially to run around the winter holidays as we're coming up to it now. So please do that. So I was pleasantly surprised to have Richard Watts, the author of this scenario, comment on one of my previous videos. And as I said, that won't affect my review of this. But the book, Cthulhu by Gaslight, 3rd edition, was published in 2012. But in Richard's comment, he said that he first wrote and ran this adventure way back in about 1985. So by the time it got to be published here, it's been heavily play tested, and all of the kinks kind of worked out, with just a few small additions that I would add in this video, but really, really minor additions. So this scenario is absolutely worthy of its inclusion in this book, and I think everyone should give it a go. So that is all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you got something out of this video. Up next in the series, I will be looking at the excellent source book, The Golden Dawn by Pagan Publishing. Until then, have a great weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye.